Welcome to the Truth in This Art Beyond, and we are back in Philadelphia, the city of brotherly love. I am your host, Rob Lee, and today I'm delighted to explore the intricate intersection of figure painting, interior design, illustration, and timeless artistic techniques with a remarkable artist. Drawing upon centuries-old oil painting methods, modern digital mediums, and her city's rich history of art and architecture, my guest's work masterfully captures character, emotion, texture, and realism in each piece. Please extend a warm welcome to the incredibly skilled and passionate Agnes Gummere. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming on. Thank you for making the time. We are here. This is kind of a little bit of a long time coming. I think when we, as you mentioned before we got started, we talked briefly, probably a few months ago at this point. And so now really being able to get to the actual conversation is very welcome.
Yes, for sure. A long time coming. It's been great hearing the other podcasts, and I'm looking forward to talking with you today.
Yeah, thank you. So let's start off with somewhat of the softball question. I like to frame it with a few more words. Let's talk about like a bit of your background. I want to give you the space to share who you are, what your work is about, and that's another bullet point there. But I think at least starting off there is good because I think there's a lot of power in it. Like someone to say this is what you do, but I'd rather hear it from the actual person of how they describe what they do and who they are and how they introduce themselves. So the floor is yours.
For sure. So I'm an artist and interior designer based in Philadelphia. I primarily work in oil paint and do figure paintings, portraits, illustration as well. And I have a variety of portraits in the works right now. So that's basically my focus. I love figure painting, and I love getting inspired by museums in Philly and elsewhere as well. And in terms of interior design, I've always been really interested in architecture, and I think that also kind of stems from being in Philadelphia and just observing the great buildings that we have here as well.
Thank you. It's good. So you're making my job easy already. So shout out to you. Could you think back a little bit? What was one of those like super early, may not necessarily be formative, but if you have one that's formative, that's great as well. But one of those like earlier moments where you recognized or even engaged with art or creativity, did you sketch as a young person? Did you, get really into archiving stuff? What was the thing for you?
That was like all I did. That was all I did growing up. So yeah, I've been drawing my whole life, and I'd say probably the earliest memories that I have, nothing specifically, but my dad is a painter as well. So I always saw him painting, and then I would just pick up a brush basically and go for it. So that's how I started. And then I always was just creating in other mediums as well.
So just kind of going for it.
Yeah, I keep doing it. Yeah. Yeah.
That's great. When I was younger, I was definitely into sketching and drawing. At one point in time, I could have been a comic book artist. Like that was the direction that I wanted to go into, and I didn't. I chose business with the nudging from family. There's no money in art, and thinking about it from this context of now being in my 30s and thinking about like sort of the ideas of someone when they're young. It's like. Yeah. Your shoes are really expensive because your feet are big. I'm really tall, right? So it's like, hey, you got to do something that makes money. You got to keep good feet, good shoes on,
Got to have a balance. But I mean, there definitely is money in art. It just sort of depends on how you apply your skills. And I think there's always a way. So I was like really fortunate to have a dad who was doing art, and same with my mom. But yeah, I overhear the comic influences in the other interviews as well. So that's cool.
Yeah, try to be consistent. No,
Yeah, absolutely.
it'd be
It
great.
definitely
Like I just make up a backstory that didn't happen.
yeah, but I mean, sketching is so important. And I feel like even if I'm going through a time in my life where I'm maybe not painting quite as much or pursuing other projects, I always have my sketchbook. And you kind of get to look back at your sketchbook later on and get inspired by everything that was on your mind.
It's great, and it echoes the sentiment that I've heard from, musicians. I've heard from
Hmm.
photographers, and did I even apply? It's a version of it, like whatever it is, the thing that you're doing. Like if you're, a trumpet player, you got your horn on you. If you're a camera, the best camera you have is the one you have on you. And for me,
Hmm.
I guess if I have a notepad on me, it's like I write down my questions, sketch, whatever, but it's something where I can kind of like capture that sort of creative burst right there.
For sure, for sure. Yeah, you sometimes might not be able to, like, for me, I might not be able to paint the painting at the moment, but it'll always be there in my sketchbook to go back to.
It's really important.
Yeah.
I mean, I need to start thinking like because so when you have your sketchbook, I got a real question after this, but I
Hmm.
definitely want to ask you this.
Hmm.
What do you like? Do you use pencil or you a pen person? How do you?
Ooh, I do both. Usually, I always have a pen on me, so it just sort of happens that that's the most convenient.
Mhm.
But I love using pencil because it's more, you can erase and you can create more nuanced shading and variations
Yeah,
sometimes than you can with pen if I'm doing a quick sketch. But yeah, I'm always just like grabbing my pen and drawing in my sketchbook whenever I have an idea.
we're gonna trade pen notes after
Yeah.
this
Or
podcast.
even if I don't have an idea, I still sometimes just feel like the urge to do something and get the ideas flowing
It's good.
creatively. Yeah.
Talk to us a little bit about some of the influences. I see, there's
Mhm.
art history. I see like sort of centuries old art, oil paintings, and techniques that are applied, and even sort of more current and contemporary stuff with like digital mediums. Tell us about that, and even speak a bit more on the Philadelphia art and architecture components that work their way into your work.
For sure. So there's a lot. There's a lot of great art in Philly, and um, I just love, observing oil paintings at Philadelphia Museum of Art. I don't really think I have an actual favorite necessarily, but um, just seeing how painters have portrayed people throughout history is really interesting to me, because a lot of it was done from life, and now a lot of things are done from photos. And it's pretty inspiring to see all these paintings that were, depicted from people, just observing them in real life, and being able to capture the natural light and all the color variations and things like that. So I oftentimes will just go to the art museum to look around and get inspiration from that. And digital mediums. So I have a background in interior design, and with that, there's so many programs that come into play, whether it's Photoshop or 3D modeling programs as well. And so sometimes I'll have a sketch that I've done and then I'll overlay that with other elements in Photoshop
Yeah,
and create sort of a layered piece of both fine art and hand drawn elements and digital.
like it. I like it. So talk about, there's just portraying people like
Yeah.
why was that sort of something that really resonated with you that kind of like I want to do this something about capturing a person's essence and
Hmm.
the emotion that's around maybe a person or what's like inside of the image. Like I'm not as articulate in saying it, but I'll say this that I'm currently in your site right now and I'm feeling things right now as I'm looking at images. I was like, oh, So, talk
Mhm.
about that and, sort of like walk us through your process.
Yeah, I feel like I've been doing portraits and drawings and paintings of people for so long that I sometimes don't even think about why I started. But you're bringing up a good question because now I'm starting to think back to like when I was a kid. I was really interested in fashion illustration, and so I would basically just look at magazines and then draw models and understand anatomy through that. Now looking back, I know that everything's photoshopped and none of it's real. Um, but it got me started with figure drawing, and then I also just would need something to draw, and I would just look at a person and draw them, whether they knew it or not. But yeah, so that's how I started, and now I just love to be able to draw my friends or people who inspire me. And I think like a little bit more recently throughout lockdown, since there weren't any other people around to draw, I just did a ton of self portraits. So when in doubt, I just draw like me,
Yeah,
or I draw my hand or my face, and yeah,
I like it. I
that's
like
my
that.
default.
So, and you kind of did walk us a little bit through the process. So, I guess I'll frame it differently.
Mhm.
When you're starting, let's say you want to embark on a new piece, right? And what's sort of that initial like ideation like that's there. And I know that folks that are painters or work in sort of the visual realm, they kind of are not done. They just kind of stop. They kind of like I'm finished with this right now.
Yeah,
So what is that indicator for you that we're good here?
that something's done.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's always a challenge, I think, for anyone. For me, I oftentimes will take a very long time to do a piece, especially because oil paint takes forever to dry.
Hmm.
And it also is ideal for me to be working during the day when I have natural light in my studio. So there's certain windows, like ideal time frames for me to paint. And then I think after a while, I just eventually realized like if I add another detail to this, it's going to make it worse. So I bring it to that point where I feel like, yeah, it's pretty good. And then I know that I'd rather leave something to the imagination or something for someone to desire more of rather than add too much detail to a point where it just feels like exhausted, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's like almost diminishing returns. It's like I'm going to put this
Yeah.
in. It's going to take that time. Especially, I look back and you've probably heard this in maybe a previous interview where I had this goal to do like a painting per month, a couple years, like maybe 7 years ago at this point. And the first one I started with, I hadn't painted at that point for like maybe 15 years. So
Hmm.
I just dove back in. I was like, yeah, just buy canvas. I'm going to do that. I have some feelings to work with. And the first thing I did was an oil painting, which I hadn't touched
That's a lot of
it.
pressure. Yeah, I appreciate the commitment though. Like that's a challenge.
I got through six.
Did you oil paint before doing
um,
that?
it had been a very, very long time.
Yeah.
But I will say, out of the paintings that I did, and four of them are actually I did seven. Four of them are in my studio where I'm currently at. One is in my bedroom, and one I gave to a friend. And the other one is in like my living room. That's
That's
anyone can
amazing.
see. That's the old one, and that's my favorite one. It looks the best out of all of them.
The first one
Yes.
or yeah.
So I don't know. I guess not, having that experience and just, it's kind of the thing where when someone that's creating something, they kind of have some idea of what they're doing, but they really don't know what they're doing. So they
Mhm.
can kind of make their own rules as they go along. That's
Yeah.
really what I'm thinking about with that painting. I just wanted to finish something. I wanted to create something at that point in time.
Absolutely. I feel like it's important to approach painting with sort of just like the freedom to paint whatever you're interested in and not necessarily feel like you need to make something look perfect and exactly the way that you have it in your head. And so, like, I guess when you have a lot of plans for different paintings and you just do them, whether it's 12 paintings or 20 paintings, and you just kind of go for it, then you can really be free and just like open up creatively.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's how my sketchbook is for me.
Thank you for saying that. Do you have, because I find that, there are certain rules and then there are certain gray areas and then there's things that people break, kind of echoing
Mhm.
what I was touching on a moment ago. Is there a rule when it comes to like painting that you love to just like, oh, I'm breaking this, or a rule when it comes to interior design that you're like, I'm breaking this rule. This is my rule now.
Okay, well, in terms of painting, because I'm usually oil painting, typically you just keep oils with oils and you don't mix other mediums because like oil and water, they don't go together really.
Mhm.
But lately I've been adding acrylic on oil paintings. And so I'm really feeling it, and I feel like I'm just going to keep doing that.
Several people are like screaming at this podcast in the future. Oil and acrylic, what are you doing?
Yeah, I mean there are some artists like there are a good amount of artists I'd say who mix oil and acrylic. It's just that when you're doing something that's like very representational
Mhm.
and you need to mix paints and mix skin tones and things like that, having paint and mediums that mix with each other well is sort of important. But I've been sort of leaning a little bit more towards abstract art lately, and I feel like I can just use whatever mediums I want for that.
That's great.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about layering and techniques that you apply with your work. I even see graphite, is another. So talk about that a bit. Like, you know,
Yeah. Well, I sketch out the portraits on the canvas
Mhm.
prior to actually painting on them. So I will draw the person and just make sure that all the proportions of their face and the anatomy are correct. And then afterwards, I overlay an underpainting, let that dry, overlay more skin tones, more details, fabrics, whatever else is in the scene. And then I've actually been using graphite to shade in combination with oil paint lately. So that's sort of how I incorporate that as another medium into the piece.
what part of the anatomy? I want to go back to that
Mm-hmm.
because what part of the anatomy is most challenging for you? Who has been in the past maybe the most challenging for you?
Let's see. I mean, hands are difficult.
So I can have my hand up as I was saying it. They're terrible. They're
Hands are
tough.
difficult. I mean, I love painting and drawing hands, and I do it a lot.
Mhm.
Uh, and I feel like my hands look like hands in my paintings because most of my sketchbook is full of my hand. And I'm used to doing that, honestly. But I mean, getting the foreshortening and the perspective right
Mhm.
to make sure that someone looks proportionately accurate is also really challenging sometimes.
Yeah, I've
Mhm.
there was I had a guest that I had on and they came back and like, hey, I want to do a portrait of you. And I was
Mhm.
like, oh, this is great. I want to be in the art. This is amazing. And like usually people don't see me in person, usually this is this capacity. And I told her, I was like, remember, I'm really tall. Just like these proportions could be really dicey.
It's important to make sure that like you're taking into consideration all of those details, even with choosing the size of a canvas. Because if you're limiting yourself to a small canvas, but you're painting a really tall guy and
Mhm.
you want to fit the whole, like you want to fit them in there, you don't want to like shrink someone down. It just looks off. But yeah, it's hard.
Initially I was like, what size canvas are you going to use? You might be able to just fit my head on it, just.
Exactly. Yeah, you need to have like, it makes me think like I would probably need to have like a 7-foot high canvas and a ladder.
That's legit. That's legit.
Honestly. or what I've been doing a little more recently is just combining canvases and doing like a triptych.
Yeah.
Or like a diptych, and having 2 canvases that are either side by side, part of the same painting.
It's really cool.
Yeah. Easier to transport.
So tell me about, and transporting is.
Yeah. Especially if you're shipping things, like it makes a difference.
Tell me about the how sort of your interior design background like serves your art, and how your art serves your interior design. Like, how do they kind of relate to each other and kind of serve each other?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so originally I went to art school for a little bit, and then I decided to pursue interior design directly. I figured that if I was meant to make art, I would make art regardless of what I decided to go to college for. So I just continued to draw the whole time when I was in design school, and that ended up working out really well because it allows me to draw perspectives for clients in the interior design world and architecture as well. So if I have an idea, I can just sketch it from my head and convey the concept to someone faster than I would if I had to draw everything up in AutoCAD or SketchUp. And then vice versa, having a background in interior design helps me to plan out paintings and be pretty like logistical, I'd say sometimes. I actually did a mural at Rec Philly in May, and prior to doing the mural, I created a whole mock-up of exactly what the wall would look like with the door and the window, and everything was to scale. So both sides of my creative background really helped me out and help out each other.
Great. It's great when that's sort of distinct, or I usually say that strangeness, those things that make us unique, kind of serve each other.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think having interior design and my knowledge from that area really helps me. Also to sort of take a break from painting sometimes. Mm-hmm. And if I'm not feeling like painting, I can do something interior design related. And then when I don't feel like doing interior design, I will paint and just refocus, and then come back more refreshed and ready to go.
Yeah, I've said it on here that I have the data background or what have you, and I've been doing that as long as this podcasting thing. So they've kind of run hand in hand, and only up until recently, like within the last 2 years or so, I realized that they operate similarly in terms of how I apply them. Like, I strategically go through, all right, I'm going to do these interviews in this way and have it down to a system. That's just straight like planning and building out like
totally.
A database.
The process that you go through, it's sort of just like you can manage everything you're doing creatively better because of everything else you've had experience with.
Yeah. And then on the sort of like, I guess, data side of it, it's interpreting the data and being able to tell the story in a way that people will connect with it. And it's like, why does this matter? Well, this is why this matters. And having the data to reinforce the storytelling.
Absolutely.
So I got two more real questions, and then I have those rapid fire questions. So, we met, at Rec Philly, and we were, you mentioned it a moment ago. Mm-hmm. So Talk about what it feels like to be an artist in Philadelphia, like whether it's in the community, because I know some people will say, I'm not part of the community, I'm not in the scene per se, and others are like, I'm an artist in this place. How do you feel as an artist in Philadelphia?
I honestly, I love just going back to my studio and painting. I wanted to be able to say, like, yeah, I'm always going to all the things and doing all the stuff in the community, but honestly, I just paint and enjoy that. But I also I love what Rec Philly is doing and think it plays such an important role in the city in terms of just having uh, the accessibility of studio spaces for creatives in the city. So I love it in that sense. And it's great to go there sometimes and just connect with other artists and people who appreciate art, basically.
I hear you. I hear you.
Mhm.
When I go up there, I kind of have that vibe. I feel like I'm there to do some work or what have you, or people
Mhm.
seem inclined to want to connect and they see that you're doing something creative. They want to chat with you and sort of like, Rec Philly is that sort of space for it. And going back to your previous thing, I kind of feel the same way. Like I like to just come here, put on this microphone and headset and do my thing. And I think it speaks to sort of the larger thing. Like some folks just kind of their work or whatever and have sort of, yeah, I have a day job, and they
Yeah.
have like this other thing. And then like sort of the work starts to fall into the second spot. Their creative work falls into the second spot
Hmm.
because they're going to all of the things, every opening, every
Hmm.
event. And, I'm interested in some of the stuff and sort of being around and adjacent or even in the scene here, I
Hmm.
guess, in Baltimore doesn't interest me in that way. It's like if a friend hits me up and say, "Hey, I have an opening, can you pull up?" Sure, that's
Same.
supporting the friends, but just being at everything all the time, you're too accessible, you're too connected, and then it's like you realize, oh, I haven't recorded a podcast in a month, or I haven't worked on a painting in a
Right.
month.
I find that it can be a bit draining for me to constantly feel like I need to be socializing about my art. And, like, for example, kind of on a larger scale, like, I used to live in New York briefly, and everyone's like, if you're an artist, you need to be in New York or you need to be in LA. And I found that I was always going to museums and galleries and absorbing inspiration from other artists, which is so important. And I still love to do that. I still love to take a New York trip or like go to an art fair or something like that. But when I was in New York, I wasn't really able to spread out in a studio. And in Philly, I can totally do that and spread out, make larger pieces, and really focus on creating rather than consuming
Hmm.
uh, content and art, basically. So I feel like being in Philly is great for that reason. It's
I,
so close to all those other cities too.
I love that you said that. The content, creativity, that sort of conversation. Because in doing this, like I get to talk with talented people such as yourself. That is a joy for me. That's a lot of fun for me. And, when I'm kind of like trying to stretch it to that next thing,
Hmm.
it's doable here, but I think it takes a little legwork. And I think it's doable in Philly, which I think is in terms of maybe size, in terms of, sort of, maybe being in that next stage as far as like how arts are treated and how opportunities are because it's
Hmm.
closer to New York and it has that sort of back and forth.
Totally.
I think that people see something that's a little bit easier to get into it, and there's a fair amount of funds and all of that different stuff there.
Yeah.
And I try not to get caught up. When folks will say, "Oh, you should be doing this type of content or doing these sorts of interviews or talk to these people." It's like,
Hmm.
yeah, but do I find them interesting? you know,
Totally. And I feel like if you need to be doing what interests you, because if you're not doing what interests you, you're not going to sound as passionate. And as long as you have, the enthusiasm, you can create that environment where it's really interesting to hear people's stories.
Absolutely. You can hear the
Same with
enthusiasm.
painting, honestly. Like, I paint whatever I want, and sometimes people ask me to paint their, like, pet, and I'm just like, don't talk to me. I'm never painting your golden retriever. But, like, I'll paint what I want. I need to be enthusiastic about it for it to look good.
Yeah. You have these conversations with folks and they'll ask you if I'm working with like in a client capacity, they'll ask me, do you love it? I was like, yeah, that's fine. But when I guess, when the things that I get excited about and I'm curious about, I can't fake that to your point. You can't fake enthusiasm. You can't fake curiosity. You can, have a fake conversation, but that's content. I'd rather do something that feels creative and, there's time. I don't want to waste your time. I don't want to waste my time.
Of course. I think that sometimes, like, it's important to be able to pull it off and be passionate about things, or at least seem like it sometimes. But when you're genuine about it, it really shows, and that's invaluable.
Yeah. I mean, I've been faking this whole conversation.
Same. No.
So I have one last real question for you.
Yeah.
And this is more of the sort of invitation part. What's next? What's next for you on the journey? What do you want to accomplish? What's next?
Yeah, totally. So, like I was saying earlier, I've been leaning more into abstract pieces as well. I actually painted over 3 paintings that were pretty representational, and the color palette, it looked like real life. But then I covered it up in red paint, and then I covered up another one in white paint, and then I covered up another one in pink. So I'm going more abstract.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of the direction that I'm going in with some of my newer paintings. And then I also have a little show coming up. Yeah.
And we'll definitely have to tap back onto that in the sort of shameless plugs portion. I do have a secondary question about that. So what was behind the decision to move towards abstract? And also, here's the other thing too.
Yeah.
When you're painting over a painting, what's that decision like? Like, I don't like this anymore. Like, what?
Right. So because some of my paintings take a while to paint, sometimes I'll start something and then I'll come back to it and keep going. And then, like, I have a couple paintings that I did a while ago that just aren't resonating with me in the same way. And so much has changed in the past months or like a year or so that I decided to do something different with it that sort of expresses where I'm at more. And also I find that, like, I know that I can paint another painting that will be representational, so I'm not afraid to cover up something that took me a long time to do something better that I feel better about, basically.
I like it. I did it on occasion when doing these interviews, and I try to be I'll put it on myself because I never want the guest to feel like, because you types are sensitive. I am as well, but you types are sensitive.
Artists.
Yes.
Artists are sensitive. That's true.
And sometimes I'm like, all right, the interview's not hitting for whatever reason, right? And I'll put it on me that I did something that was whack. And usually I never do anything that's really whack in terms of the recording process. But I don't want the guest to feel like, oh, I sucked in this. I try to, give them space to save face, but I don't listen to it. And I'm very critical. I think as a lot of creatives, a lot of artists are, of their own work. I'm like, I don't know. I could have did better here. I could have did this better. And I'll just scrap it. I'm like, this second one may not be as good as the first one, but I'm going to scrap this interview. And I don't even, put it away in a side folder. I delete it. I get rid of it. It does not exist anymore. I get rid of the questions, everything.
Yeah.
It's like starting over. And sometimes you have to be able to. Yeah.
I feel like it's similar. Like, I think, yeah, like drawing with pencil or charcoal, you just sometimes need to erase things or like tear things up and trust that you have the experience doing the process and you're going to do something even better. When I was in design school, I was known for that in my class, like a week before the final, deleting files and
Yeah.
starting from scratch. And I did it because I knew that I had everything in my head and I couldn't reproduce it. And it was always way better than it was
Oh yeah.
if I hadn't done that.
I think one of those moments that I got a piece of it from, because I look for sort of these connections from like uncommon places. I have a buddy who's a chef,
Mm-hmm.
dude named Chris Amendola, and he showed me how to make this stew. Actually, I cooked it with him. This stew
Yeah.
that is really, it's like his best item, one of his best items on the menu.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like 26 or 28 ingredients. And he's like,
Wow.
I have no problem with sharing this because no one's going to do it the same way that I did. And then I was thinking, I was like, he might just scrap the whole thing and redo it because it's his ideas coming from his. You can't
Totally.
fake that. You can't replicate that.
Yeah, it's the way he does it.
Yeah. So I want to go into these rapid fire questions. I got four
Uh-huh.
of them for you. They're all terrible. All right. So don't overthink them. So you know how it goes. You listened to this podcast before. What is your favorite color? I'm gonna go with something simple.
I knew this was going to come up. I heard another podcast, and it's really hard to choose, like you were saying. Can I go with black?
Yes.
Because it's all colors.
See, that's a good answer. That's a good answer. I appreciate that
Black.
answer.
Black is every color combined, or the absence of color, depending on how you look at it. But in paint, it's all the colors.
So this is the next one, and thank you for that because I never heard it that way. Is there a location in Philadelphia that kind of gives you a lot of creative like energy or what have you that you feel like refreshed when you go there? Maybe it's your studio, maybe it's some other space, but for me, if I'm in an arts district, I'm able to kind of chop it up and be around like sort of my artsy and creative friends. I get like, and I'm not hanging out with. I'm like there for like 30 minutes. Hey man, hey man, hey man, and then back to the studio.
Yeah.
Where do you get that creative energy from in Philly?
My studio, probably. Yeah. Like you said, studio. Or if I want to relax and go somewhere that's sort of like really beautiful and serene. I really like the Rodin Museum in Philly on the Parkway. So anywhere over there, like I'll go for a run and go to run to the art museum or Kelly Drive and just like zone out.
You gotta zone out sometimes. I like zoning out.
Yeah, you have to.
So this is a new question. I actually just put it in before you got on. What is the first thing you notice when you visit a new place? Like if you're traveling, like some people are like, the first thing I'm noticing is the lack of coffee. That's what I noticed. Like, where's the hell's the coffee?
Oh yeah.
What is the first thing you're noticing?
The buildings, the architecture. Yeah, definitely the architecture. I really like, I notice that sometimes when I'm talking about a building, I'll talk about the windows first. Architecture, windows, natural lighting design.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that tracks.
Lighting design really, it creates the whole vibe.
That tracks. That absolutely tracks. This is the last one I got for you. When I would go up there to Philly, I haven't been up there in a little while, but when I would go up there, I am looking for certain items to consume. I have favorites. What is your go-to snack, meal, something that you enjoy eating? What is something that like, this is what I enjoy?
I really like the Reading Terminal sometimes. I like going to Kamal's in the Reading Terminal. It's all Mediterranean. Really good. Yeah.
You have a favorite item there?
I'll usually get it just depends. Falafel.
It's good. It's good.
Yeah.
Now I'm going to have to try this. I'm going to say, you sent me there.
Hmm.
I'm going to tell her you sent me there. Yeah, exactly what's going to happen.
Yeah, anywhere there.
So that's pretty much it for my questions for this lovely afternoon, early evening.
Wonderful.
And
Thank you.
I want to thank you for coming onto the podcast. And two, I want to invite and encourage you in these final moments to share anything that you have coming up, social media, website, all of that good stuff. Details. The floor is yours.
Yeah, well, my Instagram is my name, Agnes Gummere, and then my website is also agnesgummere.com. Yeah, that's where to find me.
Do you have a show coming up?
I do. It'll be at Casa Vida in Old City.
Cool. You have a date for that? I want to just.
In October, so Design Week, like early October. Yeah, coming up.
That's going to be great.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And there you have it, folks. I want to again thank Agnes Gummere for coming on to the podcast and sharing a bit of her journey. And I am Rob Lee, saying that there's art, culture, and community in and around your neck of the woods. You've just got to look for it.